centuries are not really the laws which are applicable today. Do you understand?
The time traveller, for so it will be convenient to speak of him, was expounding a strange matter to us. His grey eyes shone and twinkled, and his usually pale face was flushed and animated. And he put it to us in this way, marking the points with a lean forefinger, as we sat and lazily admired his earnestness over this new paradox.
You must follow me carefully. You see, I shall have to challenge one or two ideas that are almost universally accepted. For instance, the geometry they taught you at school is founded on a misconception.
What? Isn't that rather a large thing to expect us to begin with?
Well, I don't mean to ask you to accept anything without reasonable grounds for it.
Yes.
You know, of course, that a mathematical line has no real thickness, no existence.
Right.
They taught you that.
Yes.
Yes, well, neither has a mathematical plane. These things are mere abstractions.
Yes, that's right.
Well then, nor having only length, breadth, and thickness, can a cube have a real existence.
No, I object. Of course, a solid body may exist. All things...
No, so most people think, but wait a moment. Can an instantaneous cube exist?
Don't follow you.
Well, can a cube that doesn't last for any time have a real existence?
Well...
Clearly, any real body must have extension in 4 directions. It must have length, breadth, thickness, and duration.
Duration.
You see, there really are 4 dimensions, 3 of which we call the 3 planes of space, and a 4th, time.
Quite so, quite so.
Well, now, it's very remarkable, isn't it, that this plane of time is so extensively overlooked, this 4th dimension.
But if time is really only a 4th dimension of space, why is it, and why has it always been regarded as something different? And why can't we move about in time as we move about in other dimensions of space?
Well, are you sure we can move freely in space? We can go right and left, backward and forward freely enough, and human beings have always done so. I admit we move freely in 2 dimensions. But how about up and down? Gravitation limits us there.
Not exactly.
Oh, there are balloons. We are developing air travel.
Oh, but before the balloons, save for spasmodic jumping, man had no freedom of vertical movement.
Still, they could move a little up and down.
Oh, easier, far easier down than up.
Of course, quite right. But you cannot move at all in time. You cannot get away from the present moment.
My dear sir, that's just where you're wrong. That's just where the whole world has gone wrong. We're always getting away from the present moment. Our mental existences, which are immaterial and have no dimensions, are passing along the time dimension with a uniform velocity from the cradle to the grave, just as we should travel down if we began our existence 50 miles above the Earth's surface.
But the great difficulty in what you say about our movement along the time dimension is this.
Yes?
Now, you can move in all directions of space, but you cannot move about in time. Only in one direction.
Ah, that is the germ of my great discovery.
Oh.
You're wrong to say that we can't move about in time. For instance, if I'm recalling an incident very vividly, I go back to the instance of its occurrence. I become absent-minded, as you say. I jump back in time for a moment. Of course, we have no means of staying back in time, but just as man is able to go up against gravitation in a balloon, why shouldn't he hope that ultimately he may be able to stop or accelerate his drift along the time dimension, or even turn about and travel the other way, eh?
Oh, this is all
Why not?
poppycock. It's against reason, that's
What
why.
reason?
Well,
Long ago I had a vague inkling of a machine.
to travel through time?
Yes, which would travel in any direction of space and time as the driver determined.
Well, it would be remarkably convenient for the historians.
Well,
yes.
One might travel back and verify the accepted account of the Battle of Hastings, for instance.
Or one might learn his Greek from the very lips of Homer or Plato. Then there is the future. A man might invest all his money, leave it to accumulate interest, then hurry on ahead to collect it for him.
Discover a new society.
Oh, yes, of all the wild, extravagant theories,
Yes,
really.
so it seemed to me. And so I never talked of it until...
Until you verified it.
The time traveler smiled round at us. Then, still smiling faintly, and with his hands deep in his trousers pockets, he walked slowly out of the room and shuffled down the long passage to his laboratory.
I wonder what he's up to.
Some sleight of hand trick or other.
Very shortly he returned, holding in his hand a glittering metallic framework, scarcely larger than a small clock, and very delicately made. The time traveler placed it on the table before the fireplace.
This little affair is only a model. It's my plan for a machine to travel through time.
Really?
Notice the odd twinkling appearance of this bar here, you see?
Yes.
As though it was in some way unreal. Also, here's one little white lever, and here's another.
It's beautifully made.
Yes, it took 2 years to make. Now, I want you clearly to understand that this lever here, being pressed over, sends the machine gliding into the future. No. And this other one here reverses the motion. This saddle, see the saddle there?
Yes.
Now, it represents the seat of a time traveller. Now, watch carefully. I'm going to press the lever, and off the machine will go.
I'm careful.
It'll vanish, pass into future time, and disappear.
Ridiculous.
No, it will. Have a look at the thing. Now look at the table too, and satisfy yourselves that there's no trickery.
Yes.
I don't want to waste this muddle and then be told I'm a quack.
The time traveler put forth his finger and was about to press the lever, but then turned instead to the youth.
No, come. Lend me your hand. You press the lever.
Oh.
We all saw the lever turn. I am absolutely certain there was no trickery. There was a breath of wind, and the lamp flame jumped. One of the candles on the mantel was blown out, and the little machine suddenly swung round, became indistinct, was seen as a ghost for a second perhaps, as an eddy of faintly glimmering brass and ivory, and it was gone. Vanished.
I'll be damned.
Well, gentlemen,
Look here. Are you in earnest about this? Do you seriously believe that the machine has travelled into time?
certainly. What's more, I have a big machine, nearly finished in there, in the lab. And when it's put together, I intend to have a journey of my own.
What?
Oh, my dear fellow.
Oh, would you like to see the time machine itself?
Yes, we certainly would. Let's
course.
go.
Taking the lamp in his hand, he led the way down the long, drafty corridor to his laboratory. I remember vividly the flickering light, his strange broad head in silhouette, the dance of the shadows, how we all followed him, and how there in the laboratory we beheld a larger edition of the little mechanism which we had seen vanish from before our eyes. Parts were of nickel, parts of ivory. Parts had certainly been filed or sawn out of rock crystal. The thing was generally complete, but the twisted crystalline bars lay unfinished upon the bench beside some sheets of drawings.
Well, look here. Are you perfectly serious about this, or is this a trick?
Upon that machine, I intend to explore time.
Really?
Now, is that plain? Is that plain? I was never more serious in my life.
Absolutely amazing.
None of us quite knew how to
try
take
this
it.
out.
That is a
I caught
lovely-
Philby's eye over the shoulder of one of the others, and he winked at me solemnly. I think at that time none of us quite believed in the time machine, and I don't think any of us said very much about time traveling in the interval between that Thursday and the next, though its odd potentialities ran no doubt in most of our minds. When I arrived the next Thursday, 4 or 5 men were already assembled in his drawing room. The doctor was standing before the fire with a sheet of paper in one hand and his watch in the other. I looked round for the time traveler.
It's 7:30 now. Well, I suppose we'd better have dinner.
Where is he?
It's rather odd. He's been unavoidably detained, it seems. He asks me in this note to lead off with dinner at 7 if he's not back. Says he'll explain when he comes.
It seems a pity to let dinner spoil. It's not like our host to miss dinner. I wonder where he is.
Time traveling, no doubt.
Yes,
Just then the door from the corridor opened slowly and without noise. I was facing the door and saw it first.
Well, at last.
Good heavens, man. What's the matter?
The time traveler was in an amazing plight. His coat was dusty and dirty and smeared with green down the sleeves. His hair was disordered and, as it seemed to me, grayer, either with dust and dirt or because its color had actually faded. His face was ghastly pale. His chin had a brown cut on it, a cut half healed. His expression was haggard and drawn as by intense suffering. For a moment he hesitated in the doorway, as if he had been dazzled by the light. Then he came into the room.
What on earth have you been up to, man?
Here, take some wine.
Oh, don't let me disturb you. I'm all right. I'm going to wash and dress, and then I'll come down and explain things. Save me some of that mutton. I'm starving for a bit of meat.
He put down his glass and limped toward the staircase door. I saw his feet as he went out. He had nothing on them but a pair of tattered, blood-stained socks. Then the door closed upon him.
I say, what's the game?
It's this business of the time machine, I'm certain.
Time machine, really, sir.
Did you see his clothes? Don't they have any clothes brushes in the future?
In a few minutes, the time traveler came back. He was dressed in ordinary evening clothes, and nothing save his haggard look remained of the change that had startled me.
I say, these chaps here say you've been traveling into the middle of next week.
Where's my mutton?
What? Not so much as a story.
Story be damned. I want something to eat. I won't say another word until I get some peptone into my arteries. Thanks. And the salt.
Here you are.
Thank you.
One word. Have you been, time traveling?
Yes.
He ate with the appetite of a tramp. At last, the time traveler pushed his plate away and looked round us.
All right, tell us a story.
Well, I suppose I must apologize. I was simply starving. I've had a most amazing time. Come into the smoking room. It's too long a story to tell over greasy plates.
Okay.
So he led the way into the adjoining room.
But this time traveling is a mere paradox.
Oh, I can't argue tonight. I don't mind telling you the story, but I can't argue. I'll tell you what's happened to me, if you like, but you must refrain from argument. I want to tell it badly. Most of it'll sound like lying. So be it. But it's true, every word of it, all the same. I was in my lab this afternoon at 4 o'clock. And since then, I've lived 8 days.
What?
8 days?
Yes, such days as no human being ever lived before. I'm nearly worn out, but I shan't sleep till I've told this thing to you.
No good.
And then I shall go to bed. But no arguments, is it agreed?
Agreed.
Yes,
Agreed,
of
of
course,
course. We can
Right.
get on, man. And with that, the time traveler began his story. He sat back in his chair and spoke like a weary man. Afterwards, he got more animated. At first, we glanced now and again at each other. After a time, we ceased to do that and looked only at the time traveler's face.
I told some of you last Thursday of the principles of the time machine and showed you the actual thing itself, incomplete in the workshop. I finished it this morning. It was at 10 o'clock today that the first of all time machines began its career. I suppose a suicide who holds a pistol to his skull feels much the same wonder at what will come next as I felt then. I took the starting lever in one hand and the stopping one in the other, pressed the first, and almost immediately the second, and I seemed to reel. I felt a nightmare sensation of falling, and looking around, I saw the lab exactly as before. Had anything happened? For a moment I suspected that my intellect had tricked me. And then I noted the clock. A moment before, it had stood at a minute or so past 10. And now it was nearly 3:30. Well, I drew a breath and set my teeth, and gripped the starting lever with both hands and went off with a thud. The lab got hazy and went dark. I pressed the lever over to its extreme position. The night came, like the turning out of a lamp. Then in another moment came tomorrow. Then night, then day again, faster and faster. The sun flew across the sky. I saw the moon spinning swiftly through her quarters from new to full, and had a faint glimpse of the circling stars. And as I went on, still gaining velocity, hurtling into the future, the whole surface of the earth seemed changed, melting and flowing under my eyes. The little hands on the dials that registered my speed raced round faster and faster. Years flew by in seconds. Well, then my mind came round to the business of stopping. What strange developments of humanity, what wonderful advances upon our own civilization might not appear if I stopped in that dim, elusive world that raced and fluctuated before my eyes. But what of the dangers, too, of jamming myself molecule by molecule into whatever lay in the way? I told myself I could never stop. But then, I suppose like an impatient fool, I jerked the lever to stop my flight into the future, and I was flung headlong through the air. There was the sound of a clap of thunder in my ears. I may have been stunned for a moment. A pitiless hailstorm was hissing round me, and I was sitting on soft turf in front of the overset machine. I looked round me. I was on what seemed to be a little lawn in a garden, surrounded by rhododendron bushes. A colossal figure, carved apparently in some white stone, loomed indistinctly before me. And as the storm passed, I saw the huge shape was something like a winged sphinx. But the wings were spread so that it seemed to hover. I looked upon the crouching white shape, and suddenly a deep fear came upon me. What might have happened to men? What if in this interval of time the race had lost its humanity and had developed into something inhuman, unsympathetic, and overwhelmingly powerful?
The time traveler by this time had completely captured our imaginations. He paused for another sip of wine.
And what of me?
Yes. You might have seemed some strange savage animal to people of the future, only the more dreadful and disgusting for your common likeness.
Yes, a foul creature to be carelessly slain.
Yes, I was seized with a panic fear, and turned frantically to the time machine and soon set it upright, ready to return. But with this recovery of a prompt retreat, my courage recovered too, and I began to look more curiously about me. In a circular opening, high up in the wall of a nearby building, I saw a group of figures looking at me. One of these emerged in a pathway leading straight to the little lawn upon which I stood with my machine. He was a slight creature, perhaps 4 feet high, clad in a purple tunic, girded at the waist with a leather belt. And at the sight of him, I suddenly regained confidence. I took my hands from the time machine, and soon a little group of perhaps 8 or 10 of these exquisite creatures were about me. One came up and touched my hand. And then the others touched me to make sure I was real. Then they began feeling at the time machine, so I unscrewed the little levers that would set it in motion and put them in my pocket. Wondering how I could communicate with them, I pointed to the time machine and to myself, and then hesitating for a moment how to express time, I pointed to the sun. At once, one of the little people pointed to the sun, following my gesture, and then astonished me by imitating the sound of thunder. Were these creatures fools? I thought I'd always anticipated that the people of the year 8000 would be incredibly in front of us in knowledge, art, everything. But one of these people of the future had asked me a question that showed him to be on the intellectual level of one of our 5-year-old children, asking me, in fact, if I'd come from the sun in a thunderstorm. Well, for a moment I felt that I'd built the time machine in vain. Finally, the group led me to the nearest building, which was occupied with a growing crowd of little people. This, like all the other buildings I'd observed, was badly dilapidated and weather-worn. Nevertheless, the general effect was extremely rich and picturesque. Inside, there were innumerable tables, with a great number of cushions scattered about. The little people seated themselves and motioned for me to do likewise. The tables were heaped with strange fruits, which they began to eat with their hands, and I immediately followed their example, for I was thirsty and hungry. After eating my fill, I resolved to mount to the summit of a crest, perhaps 1.5 miles away, from which I could get a wider view of this, our planet, in the year 8701 A.D. Yes, well, that, I should explain, was the date the little dials of my time machine had recorded.
Oh, yes, of course.
Well, as I proceeded, I realized that there were no small houses to be seen. Apparently the single house, and possibly even the household, had vanished.
A communism, I should say.
Shh, don't interrupt him.
The time traveler continued to gaze into the fireplace while we waited for him to go on.
Yes, well, I was musing on these things, and my attention was attracted by a pretty little structure, like a well, under a cupola, a sort of elaborate wishing well, you know. And I thought of the oddness of wells still existing in this distant time. Below me was the valley of the Thames, in which the river lay like a band of burnished steel. Great palaces dotted the landscape. There were no hedges, no signs of property rights, and no evidences of agriculture. You know, the whole earth had become a garden. But the ruddy sunset put me thinking of the sunset of mankind. For the first time, I began to realize an odd consequence of the social effort in which we're all at present engaged. One triumph of a united humanity over nature had followed another. Things that are now mere dreams had become projects deliberately put in hand and carried forward, and the harvest was what I saw. Diseases had been stamped out. I saw no evidence of any contagious diseases during my entire stay. There were no signs of struggle, neither social nor economical struggle. The shop, the advertisement, traffic, all that commerce which constitutes the body of our world was gone. It was natural on that golden evening that I should jump at the idea of a social paradise. The difficulty of increasing population had been met, I guessed, and population had ceased to increase. I concluded that under the new conditions of perfect comfort and security, the restless energy of mankind had been replaced by a contented inactivity. As I stood there in the gathering dark, I thought that I had understood the whole secret of those little people. Perhaps the checks they had devised for the population had succeeded too well, and their numbers had rather diminished than kept stationary. That would account for the abandoned ruins. Very simple was my explanation, and plausible enough, as most wrong theories are.
So this was not a utopia, eh?
Call that a utopia, where everyone sits about idly eating fruit and dozing in the sun? Really? Let him explain, will you?
Amazing.
When our group of listeners settled down, the time traveler went on again.
Well, as I began descending from the hill in the twilight, I neared the lawn where I had landed after my journey through time. No, that isn't the lawn, I told myself, but it was the lawn, and the time machine was gone.
What?
With great leaping strides, I rushed down the hill, and in a frenzy I ran violently in and out among the moonlit bushes all around the Sphinx. Just then, I was startled by some white animal that in the dim light I took for a small deer, but it ran off into the darkness. Then, practically raving, I returned to the great building of stone. There I found the floor of the great hall covered with cushions and the little people sleeping upon them. They were surprised at my abrupt entrance, especially when I lighted a match, for they'd forgotten about matches, it seems. "Where's my time machine? Where is it? Where is it?" I was shouting like an angry child, laying hands on them and shaking them. Finally, it came into my head that I was doing a foolish thing, so I abruptly dashed down the match and went blundering across the hall and out into the moonlight. I felt hopelessly cut off from my own kind, a strange animal in an unknown world. I must have raved to and fro, screaming and crying upon God and fate until I fell asleep.
We sat in the flickering firelight listening to the incredible tale of the time traveler. No one stirring, only now and then a comment or a reaction from the audience.
You had spent years in study and toil to get into this future age, and then you were filled with a passion of anxiety to get out of it.
Quite right. And when I awoke in the freshness of the morning, my head was clear and my plight was less painful. Suppose the worst, I thought. Suppose the machine altogether lost, perhaps destroyed. Well, I'll learn the ways of these people and the means of getting materials and tools so that in the end, perhaps, I may make another time machine. I decided to return to the lawn where the machine had mysteriously disappeared. In the daylight, I discovered evidence that the time machine had been dragged inside the pedestal of the giant Sphinx. There were queer, narrow footprints, like those I could imagine made by a sloth, and they disappeared into the base of the statue. Well, as I continued to explore the region, a peculiar feature which again attracted my attention was the presence of certain circular wells, several, as it seemed to me, of a very great depth. And sitting by the side of these wells and peering down into the shafted darkness, I could see no gleam of water, nor could I start any reflection with a lighted match. But in all of them, I heard a certain sound, a thud, 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 like the beating of some big engine. And I discovered, from the flaring of my matches, that a steady current of air set down the shafts. Well, after a time, too, I came to connect these wells with tall towers, standing here and there upon the slopes. I concluded they were both part of an extensive system of subterranean ventilation. I was first inclined to associate these features with the sanitary apparatus of these people. It was an obvious conclusion, but it was absolutely wrong.
It must have been their factories underground. You mentioned they were handsomely clothed, with tunics, I believe you said.
Truly, all the palaces I had explored were mere living places. Dining halls and sleeping apartments. I could find no machinery, no appliances of any kind.
But there were no adults. You described these little people as children. Where were the others? In these subterranean caverns? Let him finish.
To answer your question, Philby, I was greatly puzzled. There were no aged or infirm among this people, but somebody, or something, I knew not what, had taken the time machine into the hollow pedestal of the White Sphinx. Well, on the third day of my visit to the world of 8,701, I made a friend of a sort. Some of the little people were swimming in a small stream, when one of them was seized with a cramp and began drifting down the stream. "Hey, give her some help, she's in trouble!" What's the matter with you? Here, take my hand. Here. Get it, hold it there. There, you'll be all right in no time. Why, your friends would have let you drown, little lady, right before their eyes. There, you feel better now? What's your name?
Weena?
Weena, is it? Well, Weena, we shall be friends, you and I, and perhaps you can teach me a bit about your peculiar world, though I shan't ever understand a world where they let one another perish without blinking.
Weena thanks you.
Weena was exactly like a child, and tried to follow me everywhere. It was from her, too, that I learned that fear hadn't yet left the world. She was fearless enough in the daylight, but she dreaded the dark, dreaded shadows, dreaded being outside after dark. I discovered that all of the little people gathered into the great houses after dark and slept in droves. I never found one out of doors, or one sleeping alone within doors after dark. Yet I was still such a blockhead that I missed the lesson of that fear, and it wasn't until later that I found the reason for avoiding their strange world after nightfall. Early the following morning, while it was still dark, I arose to see the sunrise. The moon was setting, and the dying moonlight and the first pallor of dawn were mingled in a ghastly half-light. The bushes were inky black, and as I scanned the slope I saw white figures running rather quickly up the hill. Twice I fancied I saw a solitary white ape-like creature, and once near the ruins I saw a pack of them carrying some dark body. But as the light came, I saw no more of them until later that day. Well, it was very hot, and I sought shelter from the heat and glare in a colossal ruin near the great house where I slept. Clambering amongst these heaps of masonry, I found a narrow gallery that at first seemed impenetrably dark to me. I entered it, groping, for the change from light to blackness made spots of colour swim before me. And suddenly I halted spellbound. A pair of eyes, luminous by reflection against the daylight without, was watching from the darkness. The old instinctive dread of wild beasts came upon me, but overcoming my fear to some extent, I advanced a step and spoke. "Hello! Don't be afraid. I'm a friend." I put out my hand and touched something soft. At once the eyes darted sideways and something white ran past me. It was a queer little ape-like figure, its head held down in a peculiar manner, running across the sunlit space behind me. It had strange, large, greyish-red eyes with flaxen hair on its head and down its back. I followed it and came upon one of those round, well-like openings. I lit a match, and looking down I saw a small, white, moving creature with large, bright eyes retreating slowly as it watched me. It made me shudder. It was so like a human spider. It went clambering down the wall, and for the first time I saw a number of metal feet and hand rests forming a kind of ladder down the shaft. Well, it wasn't for some time that I could succeed in persuading myself that the thing I had seen was human. I don't know how long I sat peering down that well, but gradually the truth dawned on me, that man had not remained one species, but had differentiated into distinct animals, that my graceful children of the upper world were not the sole descendants of our generation, but that this bleached, obscene, nocturnal thing which had dashed before me was also heir of all the ages.
Again the time-traveler paused. A look of sadness came upon his face.
So, your future utopia had its serpent also, eh?
What was the relationship between these lemur-like creatures to the little people, the upper worlders?
Well, here was my new view. Plainly this second species of man was subterranean, and their long-continued life underground rendered them unable to exist in daylight. Well, this, I must warn you, was my theory at the time. So I decided to question Wiener about those two diverse worlds. Wiener, come here a moment. I've seen these strange white creatures with large eyes, you know. They live down in these wells. I saw one go into it just now. What are they?
Morlocks.
Morlocks? And they live in the earth?
Yes.
And what are your people called, Wiener? The little people who live in the sun?
We're Eloi. We are the Eloi.
Well, if the Eloi are the masters, Wiener, why are you all so afraid of the dark? And why have the Morlocks taken my machine behind the great doors? Oh, come now. Come. Wiener began to cry in obvious discomfort at our conversation about the Morlocks. But very soon she was smiling and clapping her hands while I solemnly burned a match. The next day I was exploring a large ruin with little Wiener beside me. I discovered another of the round wells and suddenly decided to go down despite my fears. Goodbye, little Wiener. I think it's about time I had a meeting with these Morlocks. No, let go, Wiener. No, let go, Wiener. I'll be back. Don't worry. See, look. See, I've got the matches. The Morlocks won't harm me. I clambered down the shaft about 200 yards, clinging to the metallic bars projecting from the sides of the well. Glancing upward, I saw the aperture, a small blue disc in which a star was visible, while little Wiener's head showed us a round black projection. The thudding sound of a machine below grew louder and more oppressive. My body ached from the descent, and so I was relieved to find a slender loophole in the wall, which turned out to be the opening into a narrow horizontal tunnel in which I could lie down and rest. I don't know how long I lay, but I was roused by a soft hand touching my face. Starting up in the darkness, I snatched at my matches, and hastily striking one, I saw 3 stooping white Morlocks retreating before the light. Wait, don't go! I want to talk to the Morlocks! My match went out, and everything disappeared into the gloom. Feeling my way along the tunnel, I soon found the noise of the machinery grow louder, and striking another match, I saw that I had entered a vast, arched cavern. In the flickering shadow, I saw these spectral Morlocks, some of them around a little table of white metal laid with what seemed a meal. The air was filled with the smell of freshly shed blood. The Morlocks, at any rate, were carnivorous. My match burned down and stung my fingers, and then all was black again. I had only 4 matches left.
You were ill-equipped for an encounter with the Morlocks, it seems.
Yes.
I think I should at least have taken a torch and a good pistol.
My dear Philby, when I started with the time machine, I started with the assumption that men of the future would certainly be infinitely ahead of ourselves.
Yes, if only you had thought of a Kodak,
Yes.
you could have flashed that glimpse of the underworld in a second and examined it at leisure.
Yes, and showed it to us all,
When the laughter died down, the time traveler proceeded with his story.
Well, realizing that my store of matches had run low, I decided I'd better retreat to the upper world. While I stood in the dark and began to plot my course, a hand touched mine, and I fancied that I heard the breathing of a crowd of those dreadful Morlocks about me. One of them was pulling at the matchbox, and others were plucking at my clothing. Get away! Get off me! Go on! Get off me! Get off me! I struck another match, and the Morlocks fled again. And this time I lighted a scrap of paper from my pocket, making my way along the tunnel to the foot of the shaft. When that light went out, I again heard the Morlocks rustling like wind among leaves as they hurried after me. In a moment I was clutched by several hands, and there was no mistaking that they were trying to haul me back. I retreated again, and when my second match burned out, I struck my third. By then I'd reached the opening of the shaft and could see the circle of light at the top. And as I rested, I lighted the last match, but it unexpectedly went out. I had my hand on the climbing bars now. Suddenly, my feet were grasped from behind, and I was violently tugged backward. I kicked fiercely and disengaged myself from the Morlocks and speedily clambered up the shaft, while they stayed peering and blinking up at me, all but one little wretch, who followed me for some way and almost secured my boot as a trophy.
Why, those devils!
So, your theory that the Morlocks were the servants of the Eloi was incorrect? It seems it was more the other way around. The beasts had become their rulers, but how did they rule?
Fear, my dear fellow. They taught the Eloi fear.
Yes, and even more than that, as I was to discover. My mind kept coming back to the meat they were eating in the subterranean cavern. But I get ahead of the story. The moon was on the wane. Each night there was a longer interval of darkness. I continued to wonder what foul villainy it might be that the Morlocks did under the new moon, and I decided I should arm myself and find a secure spot to sleep. All the buildings and trees seemed easily accessible to such dexterous climbers as the Morlocks, but one large palace of green porcelain that I'd frequently seen in the distance seemed to offer safety. It was fairly late in the afternoon when I'd started out, with Weena playfully running beside me, darting off on either hand to pick flowers to stick in my pockets. Oh, that reminds me. In changing my jacket, I found...
The time traveller paused, put his hand into his pocket, and silently placed 2 withered flowers upon the little table. Then he resumed his narrative.
Well, now and then from the black of the wood there came a stir of living things. And then I thought of the great fear that was between the 2 species, and for the first time, with a sudden shiver, knew what the meat I had seen might be. These Eloi were mere fatted cattle, which the ant-like Morlocks preserved and preyed upon. No Morlocks had approached us during the night, and as the dawn crept upon us, I was determined to secure some safe place of refuge and make myself such weapons of metal or stone as I could contrive. Next, I hoped to procure some means of fire, so that I should have a torch at hand, for nothing I knew would be more efficient against these Morlocks. Finally, I wanted to arrange some contrivance to break open the doors of bronze under the White Sphinx. When we finally arrived at the Palace of Green Porcelain, I discovered that it was an ancient ruin of a museum, with sections devoted to natural history, minerals and technology, even a library. As we explored the ancient museum, Weena's fear increased.
Oh, the darkness comes. Morlocks.
Oh, I see, Weena. The gallery grows dark in that direction. There, see, and here are the small, narrow footprints.
Oh, let's go.
Down in the remote blackness of the gallery, I heard a peculiar pattering, and the same odd noises that I'd heard down the well. I called to mind that it was already far advanced in the afternoon, and that I had still found no weapon, no refuge, and no means of making a fire. As we prepared to leave, I tore a heavy piece of metal from an antique machine that was mouldering to dust, and I judged it was more than sufficient for any Morlock skull I might encounter.
So, you were becoming the hunter now, eh?
Well, very inhuman, you may think, to want to go killing one's own descendants, but I very much longed to kill a Morlock or so. It was impossible somehow to feel any humanity in the things.
I can see.
Luckily, there were some cases that were really airtight, and I opened each one in hopes of finding something useful. In one of them I found a box of matches, which were perfectly good, not even damp. But I also found a far unlikelier substance.
Gunpowder?
No, it was camphor. It was in a sealed jar which had somehow been preserved. As we passed through the wood, Weena became extremely tired. I'd been without sleep for a night and 2 days, and I was feverish and irritable. I felt sleep coming upon me, and the Morlocks with it. Well, while we hesitated, among the black bushes behind us I saw 3 crouching figures. I'd gathered firewood as we progressed, hoping to spend the night in the safe circle of light from a small fire. But deciding to go on, illuminating the woods with my matches and camphor, I abandoned my firewood, and then it came into my head that I would amaze our Morlock friends by lighting a fire. I was to discover the atrocious folly of this act, but it came to my mind as an ingenious move for covering our retreat. Weena wanted to run to it and play with it, having no familiarity with fire. For a little way the glare of my fire lit the path, and we plunged boldly into the wood. Soon I heard a pattering about me, and then I caught the same queer sound and voices I'd heard in the underworld. There were evidently several Morlocks, and they were closing in upon us. It was time for a match. As I fumbled with my pocket, soft little hands were creeping over my coat and back, even touching my neck. Then the match scratched and flared. I saw the white backs of the Morlocks in flight among the trees. I lighted some camphor, and then knelt to comfort Weena, who was motionless on the ground. The wood behind seemed full of the stir and murmur of a great company. Weena seemed to have fainted, and I knew that I couldn't proceed if I had to carry her and still light the matches to drive away the Morlocks. Furthermore, in the confusion, I'd lost my direction. So I decided we'd have to stay there, and I began collecting sticks and leaves. Here and there, out in the darkness round me, the Morlock's eyes shone like carbuncles. The camphor flickered and went out before I could build the fire. I lit a match, and as I did so, two white forms that had been approaching Weena dashed hastily away. One was so blinded by the light that he came straight for me. I felt his bones grind under the blow of my fist, and he staggered a little way and fell down. Soon I had a good fire built, and, weary from my exertion, sat down, placing Weena gently near the fire. As we sat in the circle of light, I gradually nodded off to sleep. The next thing I knew, all was dark, and the Morlocks had their hands upon me. Flinging off their clinging fingers, I hastily felt in my pocket for the matchbox, but it was gone. Then they gripped and closed with me again. I was caught by the neck, by the hair, by the arms, and pulled down. It was indescribably horrible in the darkness to feel all those soft creatures heaped upon me. I felt as if I was in a monstrous spider's web. I felt little teeth nipping at my neck. I rolled over, and as I did so, my hand came against my iron rod. I struggled up, and shaking the human rats from me, and holding the bars short, I thrust where I judged their faces might be. I could feel the flesh and bone give way under my blows, and for a moment I was free. With my back to a tree, I swung the iron bar before me. The whole wood was full of the stir and cries of Morlocks. Then a strange thing happened. The darkness seemed to grow luminous. Very dimly, I began to see the Morlocks about me, 3 battered at my feet, with the others running away through the wood, and their backs seemed no longer white, but reddish. As I stood agape, I saw a little red spark go drifting across a gap of starlight between the branches and vanish. For the first time, I smelled the burning wood and heard the gusty roar, and turning, I saw through the trees the soaring flames of the burning forest. In the flickering light, I looked for Weena, but she was gone. I was convinced they'd left Weena someplace in the woods, but I could find no trace of her. Finally, I tied some grass about my feet and limped on across smoking ashes toward the hiding place of the time machine. But as I walked lamely to my old spot, I made a discovery. In my trouser pocket were still some loose matches which must have fallen out before the box was lost.
As we listened to the time traveler, I understood why he had limped so as he entered, and why his feet had been cut and bloody. He sat back in his chair, still looking weary, but excited from the story he was telling. The others in the room were caught up in the adventure like children hearing a fairy tale.
This is incredible, man. What an adventure.
That fire, you thought such folly seems to have saved your life. But poor Weena was gone.
In the security of daylight, I slept for most of the day. awaking a little before sunset. I now felt safe against being caught napping by the Morlocks. I had my crowbar in one hand and the other hand played with the matches in my pocket. And then came a most unexpected thing. As I approached the pedestal of the Sphinx, I found the bronze panels open. Within, on a raised place in the corner, was the time machine. I had the small levers in my pocket. I threw my iron bar away, almost sorry not to use it. And then a sudden thought came into my head as I stooped toward the entrance. No doubt the Morlocks had hoped to lure me into the chamber after my machine. Feeling the matches in my pocket again, I almost laughed. I could see the time machine had been oiled and carefully cleaned. I stepped up to fasten the levers for my escape out of the clutches of these detestable descendants of man. Suddenly, the thing I'd expected happened. The bronze panels slid up and fell into place with a clang. I was in the dark, trapped, so the Morlocks thought. At that I chuckled gleefully. I could already hear their murmuring laughter as they came toward me. Very calmly, I tried to strike a match. I had only to fix on the levers and depart like a ghost. But I'd overlooked one little thing. The matches were of that abominable kind that light only on the box. In an instant, the brutes were close upon me. One touched me. I made a sweeping blow in the dark at them as I scrambled into the saddle to secure the levers. Then came one hand upon me, and then another. Then I had simply to fight against their persistent fingers for my levers, and at the same time feel for the studs over which the levers fitted. One, indeed, they almost pulled away from me, and as it slipped from my hand, I had to butt in the dark with my head to recover it. It was a closer brush with death than the fight in the forest. But at last, the lever was fixed and pulled over. The clinging hand slipped from me. The darkness fell from my eyes, and I was hurled back through time. I stopped the machine at exactly the time I left. I got off very shakily and sat down upon my bench, trembling violently.
The whole thing must have been a dream, or perhaps a nightmare.
Well, not exactly. The time machine had started from the southeast corner of the lab. It had come to rest again in the northwest, against the wall where you saw it.
I see. The exact distance from the lawn where you landed to the base of the White Sphinx into which the Morlocks had carried your machine.
Precisely. Well, I know that all this will be absolutely incredible to you. To me, the one incredible thing is that I'm here tonight in this old familiar room, looking into your friendly faces and telling you these strange adventures. No, I can't expect you to believe it.
He took up his pipe and began to tap with it nervously upon the bars of the grate in the fireplace. There was a momentary stillness. The doctor was absorbed in contemplation. Finally, Philby spoke.
Well, what a pity it is that you're not a writer of stories.
You don't believe it?
Well,
No, I thought not. I thought not. To tell you the truth, I hardly believe it myself. And yet...
His eye fell with a mute inquiry upon the withered white flowers upon the little table. The flowers he had taken from his pocket as he told his story. Then he turned over his hand, holding the pipe, and I saw he was looking at some half-healed scars on his knuckles.
I'll be hanged if it isn't 1:45.
It's a curious thing, you know. I certainly don't know the natural order of these flowers. Where did you really get them?
They were put into my pocket by Wiener when I travelled into time. This is too much for me. Did I ever make a time machine or a model of a time machine, or is it all only a dream?
He caught up the lamp swiftly and carried it flaring red through the door into the corridor.
I must look at that machine, if there is one.
We followed him. There in the flickering light of the lamp was the machine, sure enough, solid to the touch, for I put my hand out and felt the rail of it, and with brown spots and smears upon the ivory, and bits of grass and moss upon the lower parts, and one rail bent awry.
It's all right now. The story I told you was true. I'm sorry to have brought you out here in the cold.
He took the lamp, and in absolute silence we returned to the smoking room. The doctor, with a certain hesitation, told the time traveler he was suffering from overwork, at which he laughed hugely. Then we all went home for the night. The story was so fantastic and incredible, the telling so believable and sober. I lay awake most of the night thinking about it. I determined to go next day and see the time traveler again. I was told he was in his lab, but when I went in, it was empty. Just then he came in from a side door with a camera under one arm and a knapsack under the other.
I'm frightfully busy with this thing, you know.
But is it not some hoax? Do you really mean you travel through time?
Oh, really and truly I do. I do. Give me just half an hour and I'll prove this time-traveling for you with specimens and all. If you'll forgive me for leaving you now, it's awfully good of you to come.
And with that he nodded and went on down the corridor to the lab. I seated myself and was about to read the paper. What was he planning to do in the half hour before lunchtime? Then suddenly I remembered an engagement I had made for 2 o'clock and saw that I could barely make it. I got up and went down the hallway to tell the time traveler. As I took the handle of the door, I heard a strange click and a thud. A gust of air whirled round me. Inside I seemed to see a ghostly, indistinct figure sitting in a whirling mass of black and brass, a figure so transparent that the bench behind it was absolutely distinct. Then the phantasm vanished. The time machine was gone, and the time traveler was nowhere to be found. I could see the marks on the floor of the lab where he had pulled the time machine back to the southeast corner, so as to arrive outside the great white Sphinx, if he were to return to the world of Morlocks and Eloy. I went inside to await his return, waiting for the second, perhaps still stranger story, and the specimens and photographs he would bring with him. But the half hour passed, and he did not return. I am beginning now to fear that I must wait a lifetime. The time traveler vanished 3 years ago, and as everyone knows now, he has never returned. I have often pondered his fate. Did he return to search for Weena, or did he hurl himself into the past rather than the uninviting future? I fear I shall never know. But I have with me, for my comfort, 2 strange white flowers shriveled now, and brown and flat and brittle, to witness that even when mind and strength had gone, gratitude and mutual tenderness still lived on in the heart of man.